Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. After the break, we will be beginning the third chapter of today's conference. May I ask Professor Magdalena Środa on multiculturalism in public space with special emphasis on the media. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's hopeless that the title is written here, because for the need of a moment I wanted to cut down this lecture. I prepared it a bit like Professor Jagiellonian University, but it turned out that we are reading the same books. I suggest Derrida, then comes Professor Godzic, with whom I'm not going to compete in the questions on media competence, so I'll simply focus on what is in the scope of my competence. That's the ethical question, things related to this. Let me start from a declaration. In many places, at many conferences, not only here, I hear that multiculti is over, that it's exploited, that it's done its maximum, that the multiculturalism policy has now lost. It's like if I heard that Christianity is over, or that Europe is over. As we know, multiculturalism is a fact. When we take into consideration the number of states, quite small. When we look at the number of minorities, cultural communities, number of races and differences between the people, we must find that it is a fact. We've got to cope somehow with it, and it's better that we can realize it. Secondly, that's a recognized fact. I believe that Christianity is an element of culture that strongly recognized multiculturalism. Claiming that there is no Greek or no Roman, there is equality between people, although they're different. The principle of love is very important here. But we have also those philosophers to whom I have this very student-like connection. For example, Henry Bergson, who in two sources asks a question that was answered by Jean-Jacques Rousseau some time ago, speaking about the progress in morality. He claims that it is there, and this, he believes that societies open up increasingly from small tribal communities. They're going into global questions, of course, not economically, but what I mentioned here is primarily the spiritual commune, and that certain people would push them forward. Socrates, Jesus and Gandhi, to mention a few of those who could do the push. Yet the entire European culture, because this is what I'm going to discuss, is based on dialectic processes of excluding and including. They must be very strongly related to European identity. It started in ancient Greece, and the difference between who a Greek and who a barbarian was, or who God was similar. The difference between the Greek, that's a human, and the rest was that their conflicts were done through conflicts and not violence. The difference with gods was that gods were immortal and the human was mortal. Also, coming out from loneliness through negation has accompanied Europe for many centuries. Later, those others, the aliens, were the savages, those who believed differently. I'm not going to continue more about this dialectic of development of European identity. Goffman mentioned that the category of the alien that needs the growing of individual or community identity, Goffman himself lists plenty of types of individuality. You can say that these are the internal aliens and also the external aliens, those who can fit into the universal category of a subject. This is the category covering those who do not fit the normative definition of humanity. If we go on, and if we reach for Julia Kristeva and their considerations in Étranger and Nomen, we find a concept of being alien that doesn't depend really on the carrier. The alien is born in us. We can follow this way of thinking, but we don't need an alien, an other we don't need aliens to have others. For example, in Poland there is this dislike for the gay people, and I believe in a way it replaced anti-Semitism. So, for example, the type of phenomena that are related to exclusion would be eminently belonging to this culture and to the processes that build the human identity as based on the community identity. Yet that's not what I wanted to discuss. I wanted to discuss quite different processes which are related to inclusion. As part of the European culture, the philosophical thought, political thought, we have plenty of those moral ideas. They go through the period of the Renaissance, then they may be revitalized. Professor Jagiellonian today mentioned one of those, namely the one of hospitality. Exceedingly lively not only in Derrida, but also in Shelley Ben Habib, an American philosopher on whom the cosmopolitan ideas are built. She sees this in the philosophy of Kant or philosophy of the Enlightenment. I wanted to look at a concept of philoxenia. I also came there through Kristeva. Xenos is ambiguous. It means the guest and alien at the same time, or the other. The principle was one of the basic orders, obligations in Greece. As Kristeva claimed, this lively resembled the policy of integration. Integration is unlike assimilation here. Philoxenia in Greece meant that when the guest came, he wasn't fed what we eat generally, but he was given products so that they could make their own food. Assimilation says, you are the guest, but do what we do. Integration says, we invite you, but we have respect for your difference. This is already a part of the Greek notion of philoxenia, and that's something that's worth remembering. We have the Stoical philanthropy and the Humanities ideals of Rome. They are very important. We have to keep on talking about it, a value that is a true virtue, one that depends on grace, namely the principle of love of thy neighbor. In a sense, if you remember Scheller's second chapter in Resentment, that's a horizontal value in Europe. I always say, using it, that whether you are a believer or not, whether you believe in the existence of Christ, it is optimistic that Europe goes this direction, which in minimum dimension means elimination of violence from the public realm, from our mutual relations. Of course, it's very important to remember enlightenment, the idea of human rights, but stopping for a moment over it, it's worthwhile to look at another ambivalence. In the Declaration of Human Rights, rights of human and citizens, something that we treat as a universal document, in a way opening Europe to certain universal values, Kristeva also pays attention to the fact that once we analyze all the arguments, there's the notion of a human. Article 4 brings up citizen. The following articles inform that the females, children, and people suffering from psychological conditions are excluded from that. Now, it turns out that we only obtain human rights when we are citizens. That was very strongly visible, for example, in Robespierre's regime, and both in France and in Poland, winning the human rights which are enshrined in our constitution depends on obtaining the Polish citizenship. So already this concept that we believe to be a European discovery, it bears this brunt of this good idealism. Already this contains certain theories showing that natural belonging is more important than being a human. Of utmost importance is the enlightened tolerance. This is a notion that we are quite uneager to approach. I'm walking the street, somebody is lying there on the snow, and I tell myself I'm tolerant, I like sleeping in bed, and he likes to sleep on the snow, and I must tolerate their choices. This is indifference, moral indifference, a very serious question. Tolerance is a very specific principle in public life. I must say that it doesn't really have to be a part of the private virtues. It's necessary for those who have a penchant to those who don't like the others. If we are curious of the world, we don't need tolerance. We can say optimistically it is a passing virtue, temporary one. 3 points must be met. First, I don't like someone, I don't like somebody's look, color, religion, convictions. Second, I have the power. I can close their lips, I can stone them. I may refuse them from the public dialogue. And if I don't have the power, I'm not tolerant, I'm powerless. Third thing is that I don't do it because I have respect for that person as a human or individual. The third argument is related to two traditions. One is the Christian tradition, which speaks of the universal value of the human ensconced in the notion of the human as created by God, but there is also the enlightened tradition, which is more modern, perhaps, because if we ask the question whether we are really different figures or whether we play different roles, but what commands respect in us, whether this is our person, it will be difficult for you to find this person. This finds its reflection in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which reads that homosexual people are worthy of respect as everyone, but the homosexual deed are negative in their character. They are ordered not as sins, but as morally disarranged. Not sinful, by the way. The problem of homosexualism, like with any other difference. It's not that we behave differently. This is the problem of our identity. I came to understand in a different context, a very American one, I understood what this problem is when the feminists debated with bisexuals, lesbians with bisexuals. Lesbians charged bisexual women that they are really this fifth column because for them sex is something for fun, and for lesbians the problem of sexuality is the problem of identity, and it is a significant problem. If we tolerated others only because they are some abstract people, we would be seeing this very important aspect of humanity. A gay wants to be respected not as an abstract person, but as a gay, because their identity means that they are gay, much like a Catholic. A Catholic wants to be respected not as a human as such, but as a Catholic in the public realm. A Jew wants to be respected as a Jew, not an abstract person who happens to be a Jew. That's why very important here is this other tradition, enlightened tradition, which refers not to respect towards the person, but respect towards being other. And this tradition is what I find very important. Tolerance finds various forms. Tolerance can be negative, positive, then it's supporting. You certainly know what Voltaire said very clearly: I don't like your convictions, I don't like the color of your skin, I don't recognize your religion, but to the end of my life I will fight for you, that you can be respected and that you have the right to your religion, whatever your credo. Today we would add also sexual preferences be. Now you may disagree with me that we can see a difference between the morality of public life and private life without any damage for enshrining certain values. In public life, therefore, we should respect others to certain limits as long as they don't harm us, but we don't have to do it in the private realm. I may not let a gay into my home. I can write in my bedroom that I loathe Jews or that I hate gypsies, but the public realm requires that we behave in a certain manner. That's why I say that tolerance is a principle of public life, and I awarded this temporal phase of existence, because if we're going towards openness, tolerance will soon disappear in its positive sense. Finally, there is this slogan of solidarity must be Polish product. I often boast of solidarity in international conferences, that we have this value and that it came up as a moment in history. We can now define it. Please see, with the experience of August 1980, we see that it is a special link built in the public realm, emotional link. There was plenty of emotion. It is beyond any divides, which serves the articulation of certain values and interests. Again, over the divides, related to the common good, and the power and force of this articulation and efficiency is proportional to the memory of the former events. That's a value that combines certain tradition and that effectively brings people together over certain divides. This is a value that replaced the Greek friendship, which, if you reach the Nicomachean ethics, it was a public value. You can also speak of two categories. One is a recognition, honored struggle for recognition, newly translated, has just been published. It's probably better to say recognition. Then it has recognition has this significance of a philosophical category. In Poland, it eludes the categorization. I've already spoken of the policy of integration and assimilation, but you can also run the policy of distribution and recognition to be treated as equals. Some groups need certain assets. They are the poor, or those who are in a poorer situation, not of their own fault. But there are those who need the social respect or other forms of respect. That's the recognition. The gays in Poland don't always need financial support, but they need respect and recognition, and it is similar with certain groups of foreigners. Sometimes you don't need much, and respect comes at a low outlay of assets, and respect is something that is also very positively distributed. Although we could probably continue mentioning various things. Following literature, Ulrich Beck publishes plenty of books as part of this modernization of reflections, or the second modernity. This category of cosmopolitanism based on difference is extremely important. This is a category that can be of historical nature, and there's direct connection with the Stoics. On the other hand, it is a significant category when we discuss European processes and community processes. I'm not going to consider it so deeply. I'm leaving you with such a reflection. A word about political correctness, a notion that many people don't like and that causes some resentment. An anecdote. Not in this hall, but near here, I debated with Professor Legutko, who is a great opponent of political correctness, and I kept on saying that political correctness, in a way, is a way of putting up norms against our language so that it doesn't hurt. You can be hurt with some objects of violence, but language is one of them. Professor Legutko possibly doesn't like it because there's an idea that got into the circulation in the 1970s in the US, when at this or that university they tried to introduce certain regulations on the language that was to stop hurting people, especially that was true about racism. After the long debate, somebody who was a good friend of the professor called him Rysiu, which is very diminutive form of his name. This is just politeness. Political correctness is something that you really personify fantastically. We can point to different genesis of those principles. Some can be those leftist or democratic milieus in the United States, but we can also point to the 14th century when etiquette was born. Following Erasmus of Rotterdam, we honed our external behavior towards what we find alien, what we don't like. Political correctness, in a way, is a form of etiquettal behavior. It's etiquette, not morality. But of course we can say that it's a much more extensive phenomenon. Judith Butler, the fighting words, she rather approaches it from the angle of Foucault, subject that the subject that has the language, has the power. I would finish at that, but especially in the media, I feel quite helpless when it comes to the media, but I just thought about 4 basic principles, the principles that I would very eagerly treat as macro-ethical principles. Years ago in Harvard, lawyers, ethicians met and they built those macro-ethical principles for business, and that's something that I deem would be very useful for the media. Possibly if I give it to Professor Godzic, he will render them more precise. The first is a slogan, of course: there is no democracy without freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of opinion is something of absolutely basic type, combating the tendencies that take the society down into the role of a tribe. There is no movement there. There is no freedom. There is also no freedom without certain norms, standards. We're more and more aware of that. Many years ago, when I read John Stuart Mill at Woking, then it was absolutely obvious that this freedom must be as full as possible. That's what John Stuart Mill said. It must be freedom to very clear but minimum borders. It must not wrong anyone. Let me put on top of that, it must not destroy the self-dignity. But he was neither a witness of what is going on in the media and of fascism. He was an educated person from the Victorian era. So why don't we consider 2 principles? The first is there is no freedom for opponents of freedom, which Mill very strongly emphasized. There is no freedom for those who want to preach views that would destroy the foundations of democracy, the society in which we live. Second, there is no freedom for dirty words. That's what I call it. And next week I'm participating in a debate on dirty words with none other but Professor Baumann, so we immediately know what this is going to be about. Freedom without norms is an anarchy. Freedom must be set on certain norms. Curiously, we who lived in communism and always fought against censorship, well, those of us who did, now make sure more that certain borders are being kept. The third and probably the most important principle is that there is no freedom without the variety, and this variety is what I find to be the source of novelty and lasting continuity in Europe, one of the most important ones. So that's why I'm so shocked to hear multiculti is over, this policy doesn't work. Possibly because the mechanisms applied were wrong, but it has to act because this is what Europe is. I will quote Professor Baumann again. Professor Baumann, with whom we met at a conference devoted to the European Forum of New Ideas, and he put forth a proposal. It can be addressed to the media, but also to various ministries of culture. He said, let's take a look at the Roman Empire. After the conquests, the people who were conquered gained rights and were included into the empire. A testimony to this diversity was the Library of Alexandria. His idea is to set up this Library of Alexandria in Europe, a place where we would keep the achievements of various cultures that have been in Europe, that build Europe, and even those that are from beyond Europe. A great project, but it seems to be attending such opportunities. A central place may be virtual, where such things are stored and which can be drawn at will. Now the fourth principle, I'd say, returning at the end to Bergson. There is no freedom, no variety without rebellion, avant-garde without the ones who try to break through the homogeneity, conformism, fragmentarization brought by mass culture. You know perfectly well what Tocqueville was thinking and his considerations with Habermas, the certainty that mass culture in its broad understanding is a form of soft despotism, a despotism without a despot, even worse, because it destroys the space of public debate. It also destroys the visual arts. It destroys our culture, not only the democratic culture. For which reason I would rephrase this slogan. What we need are non-stereotypic actions, those that break through certain symbolic fields, models of rationality that develop imagination. And this last thing I would treat as a very important task also of the media. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy pani profesor.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Wiesław Godzic has been referred to so many times, so the question of Professor is, can the media be monocultural? Professor, over to you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for a possibility of being in such a magnificent milieu. My answer to Professor Środa is immediate. No freedom. You know, I remember Mr. Kaczyński, who spoke about a certain type of mass media who are not free, but I believe that other media are free who are actually not free for those opponents. So in Poland we do not have well-positioned freedom of media, and therefore we have to talk about norms. There is this Council on the Media Ethics, and not everyone agrees with the results of that ethical council. Not everyone studies the activities. Many times people take a grudge against them. But recently we were shocked by a famous journalist who said that he would fight the norms about the participation in advertising or playing in adverts. So let's see how it is with the freedom. Let's see how it is about the freedom of mass media, and of course we have to think about the interface of business with mass media, which is quite dangerous. But as far as the in fact, as the revolt is concerned, there is no revolt. There is a whole generation without revolt. There is no rebellion, because the situation is quite fine. If the situation is quite fine, what is the rebellion for? No need to fight. And there is no diversity. I think this is quite an important category. There is no diversity in the Polish mass media, which means that many students cannot tell the difference between the public difference and the commercial mass media. They are basically just the same. All they do, they present similar things in a similar way. The presenters behave quite the same way, and they try to be liked by the same people. So, I don't know, you can ask a PhD student to do some study, and undoubtedly that would be the diagnosis of the current state of place. So, no, the mass media are not well managed. But what did I want to say? It's to put it in plain language. We could describe that as the fact that there is no multiculturalism in the Polish mass media, because we are just about to see the development of one super culture, super mega culture, whatever they use. It will be super mega media culture, and it will be include all of the subcultures. But I will take you aback by a statement, the following statement. It's not necessarily is going to be bad. A lot depends on us, and the first statement is that indeed the mass media have become so an important element of our life, and media culture has become so important that the media right now includes whatever exists there. There was a show in the 1950s, and there they said that the public would never listen to that talk show. So they used to say in the 50s, there where it is important and significant, this is where I'm going to I will use the applause sign, and then you all have to face the camera and start listening. So I will have. So once you become really exhausted because of all of that listening for so many hours, when I want you to become really attentive to what I'm saying, I will give you the warning signal that it was going to be really something worth listening to. But now let's get down to business seriously. What is the relation of mass media to culture, especially if we look at the global mass media, because probably the global mass media does take account of culture and its development. Also, we have some specific media. So for those type of mass media, it's important the way they show the world. And also, we should also remember that we're participants of culture. We are part of a participatory culture, which means that if we do not produce culture, we're sinners. So it means that what is required of the modern person basically is the production of culture, the production of media. But as far as the mass media are concerned, I'm thinking about Russians, Kudovkin in the 1920s, and the Russians had that idea then that the mass media are for all. The mass media are to be understood by all. Ethnical language is not welcome, and therefore non-specific behavior, some specific behavior is also unwelcome, which was not true. Eisenstein, for instance, in cinematography, and the Russian party colleagues, well, not colleagues, well, their political bosses were actually interested in doing away with illiteracy. So the mass media and the cinema was there to influence the masses, and it was considered as something useful. But I remember ethnographers who spoke about the chicken paradox in the mass media. Namely, anthropologists came to a community that has never seen mass media, and so they saw a movie, and everyone and all of the participants of that village said all they see is a chicken. So they looked through that video material, and they found out that there was a chicken running through the frame, but there was no intention to show the chicken. So no one thought of that chicken as far as the producers are concerned, and for those villages the chicken was the most important animal. So the only symbol they were interested in was the chicken. So the entire semantic framework was irrelevant. The chicken was relevant. So I'm thinking about the first development of mass media, and they would have global mass media, ethnical mass media. But I think we are witnessing many different contradictory activities that we see in the information field. For instance, I found out that some of the global broadcasters are all basically the same, which is obvious, but it is due to the fact that there are two professionals in the world who do such information studios. So in fact it's just two guys doing the information on news channels all over the world. And of course authors of websites, they conjure up all sorts of things, but then they always start talking about functionality, that is how a web page must be arranged so as to make a good web page, and then they have some add-ons to it, which is secondary. So we have some universal features of the mass media. We have some obvious features of the mass media. So we see that movies are made in a special way. For instance, the Vatican seems to be one of the most important controllers of audiovisual character. I remember media events, for instance, that is a book by Diana Katz, and they show how big ceremonies are shown. For instance, the death of a pontiff are depicted in the mass media. So they either show what the Vatican allows you to show, and so you can't see anything, or you can use the second circle of mass media, and there are books and PhD studies written by priests, and those priests define how close can a thing be shown so as not to create a paradox, so as not to break the sanctimonious character of an event. For instance, Andrzej Garapich wrote as a priest a book on how to film Holy Mass so that everything is okay with the Mass. So there is this third circle of mass media that gives us a possibility of creating memes, and we see also the development of creative output of the general public. And so there are different stages of mass media: strictly controlled, sort of controlled, and creative. And some universal things may be less or more universal. Some people are aliens, some people are ours. Someone is a stranger and someone is not a stranger, but belongs to our own inner circle, and this is how one start developing the time of honor. Like this honor may be ethnical honor, or maybe Polish honor, or it may be an honor about sexuality or interpersonal relations. So how to put all of that together, that's quite interesting. That would be quite valuable if we could start thinking this way. But I'm also thinking in the first circle, I'm still talking about this first circle of mass media, that we must have a balance between two modes of presenting, because one of them is an invitation to discussion, and the second circle doesn't give you that offer. So it's quite a closed presentation. So just take me or not as I am. For instance, let's look at the Polish ethnical programs that we show abroad. So we show our ethnical programs to Belarusians or Lithuanians. I went to Lithuania, and Lithuanians are not really pleased with this vision of Polish ethnicity, because this is conquistador style of imagery, because Poland shows how Poles should behave in Lithuania, and so we describe it from our own ethnical point of view. And all of a sudden I understood that we haven't spoken about the consumer, and we must talk about a consumer. Prof. Professor Środa would probably say that first we must have a human, then a citizen. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not as far to say that first we must have a consumer, but still I believe a consumer is an important part of our activity. So let's take an example. There will be two examples, and both examples in Asia. Because in May there was this conference in Osaka, and I had the pleasure to attend that conference in Osaka, and I was showing the Polish approach to Polish-Asian relations, and that was a horrible experience for me. First, I was preparing for 3 months, and then I said, no, it would be impossible. I wanted to do a study in order to see what is the place of Asia in the Polish mass media. And it turns out Asia is not present in the Polish mass media. Then I thought, okay, maybe the stars, the celebrities Asian celebrities would be present in the Polish mass media, but that is not true. Daewoo suggested an advertising so as to promote their cars, and the idea was to have a very strong positive valorization of the two nations, of Poland and South Korea. So there was this image, a blurred image on purpose. They wanted to give dynamism. And the first was archery and sports. So you could see a Polish and a Korean sportswoman, and you can tell the difference between the two. The second idea was dance. In the Korean dance, there was a couple dressed in the Polish folk dress, and then hospitality, that is pouring tea by the representatives of one and the other culture. So that was the main activity. There was some sort of symphonic music, and then they showed the entire orchestra, and the orchestra that was to unite the two people, and then the statement, Poland, Korea, 40 million people. There are so many commonalities. Daewoo, it's so good to be with you. Well, that is the advert that was there to balance the contrast, take them away, to show the unity, the proximity, cultural proximity. But are we just like Koreans? I don't think so. And Korean imagery specialists had that idea to have that advertising, which was straightforward and very much simplistic. And they simply wanted to see whether that would be effective and how many cars were sold after that advertising. I don't know. But they were comparing cultures. And I think that comparing cultures is a very complex business. I don't think that the strategy of approximating products to the consumers is a good strategy. I don't know whether we buy in this strategy. Maybe we, quite on the contrary, would be interested in buying something that is distant, mysterious, unknown. That would be something enticing for the Polish consumer and not the proximity. And now another example. Perhaps we might think about perhaps we should think about another ethnicity which Stuart Hall described as the ethnicity of margins and peripheries. He said that we all were ethnically somewhere located somewhere. Let me read that in English.
Ethnically located, and our ethnic identities are crucial to our subjective sense of who we are. I podawał przykład.
He gave an example. I like Stuart Hall when he speaks ill of Great Britain, and he said that Great Britain had that ethnicity doomed to survive. Doomed to survive by means of marginalizing and moving other cultures. So we said little about the fact that in fact we may be like English, we'll be like conquistadors. And I think our friends won't feel offended, but it's quite Victorian, isn't it? And so we see ethnicity of peripheries and margins, and one might belong to that group, a marginal group, and not be a Pole, not be an English, for instance. So the question is a question that may be somewhat familiar to us. Recently, I learned that the best company selling sandwiches in the world, they say that their heroes are the authors of local sandwiches that supply the global network of this sandwich. In Norway, they have this it's maklak, they call it in Norway. So it's something about fish. And after many years of their products, they start ethnical sandwiches. Or in Poland, they introduce oscypek, which is funny. Actually, it is very funny. I think this concept shows that we are very much after symbols, because they're using symbols, and of course symbols are translated into money. And now, what is specific to mass media? This is how mass media create the world. This is how mass media show the world. And sometimes we just take this imagery as it is into our conscious minds. We think it is obvious. But for instance, Big Brother, that I studied for quite some time, I even attended a meeting of Big Brotherologists from 40 more countries. And there it's quite interesting things that they were talked about. The structure was quite clear, because today's structure is the format. It's not the genre, it's the format, because this genre is not present in cinematography nor in the TV business, but the format, the format is calling a product, giving a product a name. And the point is to give a name that already exists and add a new element. So we do something like Big Brother, but more sex, and all the participants are older. Or, I know it's shocking, what I have just said was not shocking, now will be shocking. Once I was a court expert in a situation where the court had to take a decision whether the fact that the moderator of seniors competitions for children takes two kids through the left side, from the left side of the stage, makes that program different from another guy who was taking only one child from the right side of the stage, not from the left side of the stage, but from the right side of the stage. And that was, the court was studying whether the format of one competition was different enough from the format of another TV program. So it shows that this standardization is quite far-fetched. So it was a very bad, negative example of standardization that is quite far-reaching. And but what is interesting that in fact Big Brother was utilized by many ethnical cultures to express themselves, and there is even a book about Big Brother program that shows that even in Europe that Big Brother was utilized by ethnical groups to show themselves. So what it showed that that program could show the cultures of different participants, because they in fact had the same rules, but they had fun, they enjoyed themselves in different ways. And for instance, in Big Brother program, there would be a team composed of Germans, British and Poles. So we must remember that this may actually be quite intriguing for the researchers, those who do research and studies in culture. I don't know whether our colleagues would agree, but Britons produce celebrities as the guys that are close to their heart and quite sort of simple walking folk. In America, celebrities and the stars are quite above the general public. So the American stars are quite far away from the general public. In Britain, quite on the contrary, a star is someone who is very close to the general public. And also the next point, which is locality, which is a local celebrity. but it's not done by the local mass media. But let me give you an example.
Of a reality television celebrity and a local personality or character. Czyli nie wiem, czy Państwo oglądają.
I don't know if you watch new scripted reality. So those characters, if they in their local community they play and become councils, members of the local councils, which actually they may become, then that would be quite interesting because that would promote local celebrities. And the final part of my presentation. McLuhan joked that mass media about message but massaging. So if you are staying close to the mass media, you're being massaged. And the mass media has disappeared because it's ubiquitous. Mass media is simply ubiquitous, that is why we don't see it. And another quite interesting quote by Deus. Rather than with media. We are living a media life. Naszym systemem ekologicznym. So which means that the mass media have become our ecological system. We live in the mass media, not with mass media, but we live in the mass media. And the second example, the first one was about Daewoo, and the second example may be quite surprising for you. Maybe I'm forcing you to watch TV shows that are not really good, but they're food for thought. But don't watch too long. Bilgun Aryun Tabar. That was the only character that in that period was an Asian person and also was quite frequently present in the mass media. We knew nothing about Asian people, we knew nothing about Asia at all, and we do not have many Asian celebrities and stars in our mass media, but that was the only one. And that person was invited by Szymon Majewski in his talk show. Viva Polska had that program that was called Sleeping with Stars. I do encourage you, do watch a little bit of really bad taste. And Ale Mondrale, yet another program, this is where that person was presented. But the structure of this person is quite important. It's a guy. And if you look at him, you think it's an idiot, just plain idiot, but a very intelligent idiot he is. And his remarks are quite good. He's quite primitive, half Mongol, half Pole, as he describes himself. Many times using the word we, but saying we, it was not quite clear what he referred to. So it has become a stigma, it has become a symbol of his. Well, in fact, for instance, there was this journalist who said that he had problems with the speaking, but no, he's pretending. He speaks the Polish language with a slight accent on purpose, and he said that his knowledge of the Polish language is so weak, so that he doesn't know how to use the Polish language properly. For instance, how to grab the stick of malish. Of course, this is dubious meaning. Or, for instance, to take the fur of the yak. That is what he, or for instance, to take a wife into the yurta and hide her under himself. So he was playing this language and being ignorant about the Polish language, and he was suggesting that he is someone else than he is. But he was actually showing all of the major mistakes of journalists. He always came unprepared, always nonchalant, always blind, always strangely determined to speak about the one and the same thing. And after a movie, he would say, "What was that movie all about?" Quite a strange bloke, sometimes driving you to madness, irritation, and anger, but still very popular. And now, another point about Aryun Tabar is quite important because it's about children. We didn't speak about children much. We don't know how children perceive multiculturalism, but let us assume that children do not coax anyone to some dubious practices, although Freud spoke about strong sexuality of children. But the person I'm referring to was not referring to Freud, and that guy was referring to someone else. But children would not lie, and children always speak the truth. So the situation was as follows. There he was, Arion, was performing in a program alla Mondrale, and he had that question. So he enters the stage and he receives the question, "Where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Korea." No, the kid said he was from Korea. So, of course, it would suggest this is we are the place we come from determines us. And he says, "I'm from Korea," and then he adds on, "Northern Korea." All kids fell silent, and all adults were laughing, roaring with laughter. And those were the days when Northern Korea was being aggressive towards Southern Korea. But children did not understand that laughter, and they didn't know the difference between North Korea and South Korea. And then they started talking about entertainment. So this is the man who teaches dancing Gangnam Dance. So this is the man who does everything in television to be funny, in order to be funny. But children were not at all moved by the facial appearance of that, or they were not impressed by the behavior of this man. And for instance, then the journalist said that burping is expected in the country of his origin, and then the guests started laughing, but the children were not surprised and were not amused by that, so the kids didn't get that stereotype yet. Well, what are my conclusions from this review of different materials? What are my conclusions? Well, more often than not, I think that the revolution of the mass media is such that those who didn't speak so far started communicating, and they're communicating up to the limits of exhibitionism, and those who used to speak in the past fell silent. Why did they fall silent? The problem is not about being silent and being more vociferously silent, and it's not about giving up communication skills, which we believe to be very important, but the mission is not about being locked up in the ivory tower and celebrating the values that have been experienced by so many. But I think we may also think that, okay, Asian culture is a strange culture to the Polish mass media and to the Polish public. In any case, Asian culture is seldom present in our mass media, which is quite strange if we keep on talking about getting our economic ties, intensifying our economic ties. But I think Asia is still shrouded with this secrecy and ambiguity, and we don't have to speak Asian languages because all Asians speak Polish language. This is what we learn from the Polish mass media. And perhaps there to the east from Poland we have just one Asian culture. They all dance the same dance. We are all hospitable, we all enjoy archery, we all drink tea, and we all speak Polish, Asians included. That's the whole point of the mass media programs. Let me finish by a metaphor of peace. Of a hotel room. A hotel room in which I spent my night. It was difficult for me to find the button to press to switch the TV on. Sociologists say the first thing I do when I come to a hotel room, I switch the TV on. But I couldn't open. I couldn't switch the TV on for some reason. I tried hard. So I started calling the reception desk, but there was no telephone. There was no telephone in the room. Here in Kraków Hotel, you don't have these telephones. Samsung. Actually, I had to find it. I found a tablet by Samsung. I poked my finger at it. I started rewinding pages. There were icons, and they were regulating the temperature of the room. I could call anywhere, probably for free because of Skype. I could get in touch with the waiter. I could do many other things, which is an important metaphor, because we can speak long, but what are we talking about with this world?
Coraz to ktoś odpada z tego biegu. Coraz bardziej słyszę, że nie.
I see many times people drop out from the mass media. They say, no, I don't want to tweet. What is tweeting all about? I don't know. I know how to tweet, but you have to keep on running. Because I'm afraid that media culture, the media culture encompasses most of those cultures that we know and we cherish, and all those cultures that are yet here to come. Thank you for your kind attention.
Jest. Chciałabym może skorzystać z okazji teraz, ponieważ pan profesor
Professor Godzic will have to leave, so I have a question. Would you like to ask questions now? To address questions to Professor Środa and to Professor Godzic now, or perhaps after the panel discussion. So if you have any hot questions, then please fire off. Are there any questions? Any questions there? Please use the mic.
Zaczynamy drugą część tej trzeciej części, czyli rozpoczynamy panel. Przekazuję.
Now let us move on. We're changing the set of panelists, and I'm giving the microphone to Magdalena Środa.
Dzień dobry, to myślę szybciutko tutaj organizuję.
Good afternoon. We are getting organized here.
O, tak, działa.
Jesteś zimny. A my po nie mamy pić.
Dzień dobry Państwu, witam serdecznie. Zapraszam na panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Tabloidisation of multiculturalism. First, a question to the organizers. Do we have 1 hour or is it less? Because we have a very interesting and very varied panel, so I wouldn't like to cut it down. Cezary Gmyz, currently do Rzeczy Weekly and Republika TV, earlier Rzeczpospolita Daily, then Łukasz Warzecha, a journalist of Fakt, active online as well, blog in Salon 24, Liliana Sonik, a journalist for years in public TV, Andrzej Garapich, the man who will lead us into the world of the internet, president of the Polish Internet Studies, then Professor Hartman, another journalist but also philosopher, bioethician, Jarosław Makowski, journalist, theologian, and my name is Kursa, and I'm a journalist of Gazeta Wyborcza. And now I really have one problem, because you defined for us the subject tabloidization of multiculturalism, ? When I listened to the previous persons, there was a lot about multiculturalism and tolerance, diversity, character of media as such. Maybe we as journalists should make a reference to what has been said here before. Professor Środa put forth a very interesting catalogue of 4 macro principles for the media. I understand principles in this multicultural society, so could you please comment on them? Let me reiterate the most important of them. 4 macro-ethical principles in the public debate for the media include: there is no freedom for opponents of freedom, and there is no freedom for the dirty words. Then Professor Godzic said that in Poland we have problems with norms in the media. We shouldn't be journalists if we didn't comment it now when it's still hot. I don't know, who am I supposed to ask first? Maybe Professor? Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's the first time that I'm presented publicly as a person from the media, but we often read what you do. Well, for 9 years I've done that, but I've never been identified as a journalist, but I identify myself more and more with the media, and I begin to understand how they operate, both the electronic and paper media. Paper, which begins more and more electronic as well. Media have been caught up in democracy, which means certain averaging of the standard. There's powerful interpenetration between the elitist bourgeois media that in bygone days were modeling themselves on the BBC standard, and the folk, if not tribal media, tabloidic, that lived off being bloodthirsty, lying, and all the mean and debasing things. It's like in all the other realms of life, and there is a certain equalization here that, whether we want it or not, whether we like it or not, means certain corruption, which means destruction of the high standards. And those lofty media that featured specific culture of the word, logic, criticism, self-criticism, the tendency and skill of presenting things from various points of view, including a point of view of certain milieus exotic for the consumer. And that is a very high price that needs paying as the consumer became generalized, mixed, in a way got standardized. Those very comfortable divides into the qualified newspapers, quality newspapers, and all those spit on the media is being lost. If you are in the media, therefore, if you participate actively as an author in various public struggles, you must find a mode of living to communicate with everyone. I'm trying to control the lowering of the standards. I lower the cultural standard to be able to communicate with various, possibly most numerous consumers, recipients. Okay, I know there are many of us, so I must be finishing the last sentence. The challenge that we are facing can be, in the shortest of a short, defined in the following manner. There used to be public opinion in the past. It wasn't public. This was the upper middle class opinion, really. The people had no opinion, the people had no voice. Today we have public opinions, plural, of hardly identifiable mass social hordes, where this upper middle class is practically invisible. Therefore, our task as people of the pen is to find ourselves in this new reality of the grand hordes that walk the agora this way and that. Liliana Sonik, what do you think about this reality? Can I be heard better now? Okay. A bit continuing upon what you said, and also by the way of what Professor Środa said, and Professor Godzic, by the way, as well. Honestly speaking, I'm a bit banjaxed by what Professor Hartman said. I understand that you have to be clear, but to what degree a university professor and all of us here in this room are capable of following the chameleon's policy, adjust who to, what to, and at what level. What is the task of the media? The media describe reality, the media interpret the reality, build the language of that interpretation, propose this language. If they lose credibility and lose faith in the existence of sense of pursuing some universal truth, description of reality that would be as thorough as possible, they either turn into an economic entity that's a machine for doing money, making money, or become the grounds for exchanging emotions. That's really using your flail to hit the other on the head as strongly as you can. The more blood and shout, the better. Both in the are correlated. Both this attitude to seeking money, or you seek the fame of a celebrity, or simply this is the fight for power. When I think why Polish media, especially the written ones, it's still the queen of all the media. Why is it in such a poor state, nearly bedraggled? The answer given by Professor Hartman is either not full or meek, because we've got neighbors, Germans, Italians, the French. I do encourage you, even if you go to Empik or a large bookshop in the center of those countries, take a look at their dailies. Sociological tendencies are similar, aren't they? We're not genetically or biologically sillier. What's happened that our dailies are so shoddy, so thin, and they can hardly make it, while theirs, they also face problems. But just compare, just look for yourself how the dossier of information on Syria are treated there and how it was treated here in Poland. In Poland, it's just a question of emotions. That's it. And I'll continue, hopefully, in a moment. Andrzej Garapich, I saw you. I don't agree with either of the previous speakers. This must be the description of a world that possibly exists in our heads, but it's not any true world. I deal with the internet. I don't like to speak of the things that go beyond my professional competencies. What Liliana mentioned about when you ask Poles about classification of the media, where there is most problems, when there is least credibility, that's the TV. That's what the Poles tell you. But I said about the poor condition of the press. Well, I'm really shocked to see that the press titles are still published. I think it's just a matter of months when everything will move to the internet, where the situation is entirely different. Speaking of the internet as a single medium is not true, because it's not so. We have a whole spectre there of both precious, marvelous places for discussion, dispute, and recently I heard such a comparison which I like. I haven't thought it through deeply, but I think I like it. that this is the cafe of the Enlightenment. I'm not a historian. They tell me that certain artistic, cultural currents were born in cafes. That's where you discussed when you had something more to say. You won the discussion, and you could spread those currents. And these were the cafes where all that was born. Today, the cafe is the internet. Of course, we have also the beer bars and cafes where some come and see what is going on at the moral debasement as well. And that's where culture is born. That's where we have no problems that we imagine to have in the media that still exists over there. The microphone goes to the right side. Okay, I won't agree fully with the previous speakers because I couldn't do otherwise. I believe that we, the journalists ourselves, are guilty of the death of the press because the media began to adjust themselves to a broad consumer. We cannot call that consumer names with very little exceptions. Now, I'm always greatly astounded when I read the latest Die Zeit, and this is a paper that won't fit on any table that I have. It is a weekly, yes, I may not agree with it, but I really love reading it. It's the only one whose sales don't fall, unlike others that try to adjust to the reader. I remember the days of the power of Stern and Spiegel. This one, which is called Qualitätszeitung by the Germans themselves, it copes very well in the market. In Poland we have a similar case. I am not in favor of Politica Weekly, but I believe that this is the one best made in the market of people who know who their consumers are. It's not towing the line of the Big Brother watchers, of a TV series watchers. No, it tries to coin its reader through intelligently edited sections and extras. There are plenty of things that we observe in the Rzeczy Weekly. Of course, telling it in our language, we try to follow certain things. The problem is that when we were starting our adventure with the media early in the 80s, we dealt with the media where the information text could have been 12,000 characters long. That's something that you can hardly put for a major subject. When I got 20,000 for the last one, I was really crying. That was absolutely the maximum luck available. I know where it happened. We're speaking of tabloidization. It happened when not Super Express but Fakt entered the market, and when the power of Springer and the professionally made tabloid made everyone try to come up with it. In Germany you don't catch up with Bild. There is no daily that would be capable of competing against the tabloid. Germans don't do it. The problem is that we have started to believe that if Fakt sells, we should do the same and toe the line. Yet, despite all this, I believe that we should apply the famous principle, differ or die. We are becoming much like one another. That's our main problem. Let me now follow upon the freedom of the word here. I don't favor any limitations in the freedom of speech, even for dirty words, dirty speech, because this is an introduction to preventive censorship, that certain views cannot exist in public debate or in public space. I believe that the spectre of views should be as broad as in the United States, where you start from assumption in the United States you have no ban on the promotion of Nazi or communist ideology. I wasn't there, so sorry. Okay, let's get back to our discussion. The 4 macroethical principles. I'm sorry, I cannot interpret for someone who's not using the mic. There is no democracy without freedom. There is no freedom without norms. No, not like that. Sorry, I cannot interpret a person who's not speaking to the microphone. I simply can't hear here in the booth. Okay, so I'm finishing because no. This way or that, I'd like to discuss political correctness during this. That's the worst horror that exists in public debate. Exclusion of people, not saying you are not right, you have no right to think like that. That was very well visible to Piotr Sakowicz's book, also in my publishing editing board, when some journalist told Piotr that he has no right to think this way or to write this way about the Warsaw Uprising because this may not be permitted, full stop. And this is an argumentation that we are usually on the receiving end of it, that we have, for example, no right to promote homosexualism. You cannot now debate the capital punishment. Okay, I'm so glad that already at the beginning we touched the controversies and possibly the core of what we're going to discuss. For example, to what degree we as journalists should be politically correct. For example, speaking of multiculturalism. Andrzej Warzecha, why not here? Łukasz, sorry. Everything is right, but I'm not Andrzej, I'm Łukasz. I'm glad that Czarek got this discussion into the tracks which are closer to the subject of this conference, because we're not going to discuss here the condition of the media, so it's probably worthwhile returning to the questions that Professor Środa discussed here, and thank you very much for speaking that these were just the points. No, but I was taking down notes as you were lecturing. Okay, I believe we can put this aside now. Now, those points were really significant, especially the proposal that I found very striking for discussion, that there is no freedom for opponents to freedom. Let me use 2 examples which show where the problem lies, or at least that's what I believe. The interpreters may have problems with translating it into English because these are specifically Polish words. A famous Polish actress some time ago in Breakfast TV discussing how some theater production was done. He said that the producer or director just jewed down on the money. What does it mean, jewed down on the money? A word that came from a certain stereotype of Jews in Poland, how they were seen, and it's been in Polish language with us for quite a time. Then saying that these are hurtful words based on wrong stereotypes. But luckily, nothing horrible happened to the actress. And I must say that I'm very glad that Polish media have plenty of space for freedom, because you can still say without major consequences that director jewed down on the money. And recently writing for W Sieci, I could describe an event on a car park when a group of Roman gypsies, not Polish ones, was running a specific activity. Just be warned, by the way. The group walks around the car park and they try to peddle knives, iPhones. Of course, when the police turn up, they immediately escape. And I said that this is a live illustration of another Polish phrase, ocyganić, gypsy you up, meaning to cheat you to swindle, to con. I can write it. I can still use this word in Poland describing such a situation, but in Germany I'd probably face serious consequences doing that. Coming back to the question put up here by Professor Środa, this is certainly a very serious dilemma, but observing the way that the discussion goes, recently I've supported strictly freedom, and I think like Czarek, even at the cost of certain my feelings suffering at it. What is really a problem in the discussion of multiculturalism is the filter of political correctness that we impose on ourselves. It won't let us say that there are certain ethnic groups which, as groups, in their majority, cause problems. Something's wrong here. It's not that we are too unfriendly or that they get too little money from the state. No. The problem is vested in them. Whatever funds are applied, something's going to be wrong. I'm not going to call them names, but there are those groups. They exist. Sorry, I cannot translate people who are further away from us. No, I believe that the percentage here would be different than in the group that I mentioned. I'm glad that I can still do it, still can write it. Well, recently we had a first instance of court delivering a curious verdict in a civil case where one of famous journalists was sued. There was a woman who wanted to commit abortion. He said that she wanted to murder her baby, and the court said that yes, generally we can say that it is a murder, but not specifically about a given person. To me, this is an illogical verdict, and I'm very glad to say that we are the space of plenty of freedom. I'm afraid of preventive censorship, and that's why I'm afraid of political correctness. I want to never to use this filter as long as we can. I see that Jarosław Makowski's got plenty of comments. First of all, let me confess I'm a free thinker in the sense that it's a very free process for me and slow, so it will take me a long time to address the questions that our dear professors here discussed, but 2 words ahead of it. With the media, the case is like with democracy. It's not the best system, but nothing better has been invented. That's something that lets us maintain a specific order in this world. The same thing is with the media. We complain on them, but we haven't invented anything better to describe this world and to inform societies. The fact that we incessantly criticize the media, that we want the media to be better, seems to be by all means proper. As far as Polish media are concerned, the problem is profoundly in them all being supposedly the same, namely that they try to use this negative equalizer going down. In the society there are different categories of the reader who would like to read different texts at different level. If on Monday you take the weeklies into your hand, they are actually the same. The standard is now set by Fakt, to which the others, so-called opinion-forming weeklies, try to catch up with, to have at least the circulation similar to that of Fakt. And another thing which is quite sorry for a reader of the Polish media is always on Monday that some things are absolutely foreseeable. foreseeable. It's the coffee that wakes you up and not what you find in the media. Those weeklies are quite foreseeable. Sometimes they even have the same covers. Despite the plurality of the media, hundreds of clever brains working in the newsrooms, those media I find foreseeable. In this sense, they don't introduce pluralism in the description of the world and expressing of opinions, but what they actually do is they introduce certain monolithic nature of describing this world and presenting opinions. That's what I find one of the true Achilles heels of the Polish media. Also, when it comes to the writing about the multiculturalism, which I hope we're going to discuss in a moment. Why don't we pass on to it just right now? I wanted to ask you how the issues of multiculturalism in Polish media is tackled. Is it present at all? What do you think? First of all, I won't agree with the fact that, with the opinion that we have so uniform media. No, okay. They are somewhat multicultural as well, because the Polish society, despite being compared to the Western ones as highly homogeneous, it has its niches, and some of those have their own media services, which proves radical differences in the tone and language between various media. And there are those radical or extremist media, which I read only in one aspect. I read the poison pen things on me. They give me plenty of pleasure. Rafał Ziemkiewicz, the main chap in that stream, called me the pitiful rogue. And there are also the other media that try not to call people vile or filthy, as I was called, and they try to use euphemism possibly, maybe sometimes exceedingly cautious, which may be a reason to irritate us as well. But there is complete freedom. Nobody takes anyone else to prison, and you won't even get a libel for this vile language. And lampoons or libels, where people who won't keep standards won't be let in. Bye. But now, please don't interrupt me that much. Let's speak about the multiculturalism. In Poland, it is very limited, so as such, it is not the object of consideration for the Polish journalists. No, just maybe this one aspect that we have this niche of 19th century society in the among the Polish people, those who are becoming a nation based on this traditional and religious legend, this methodology of politics and history. That's just an observation of sociological nature. When it comes to
true multiculturalism, then in Poland we do not have social conflicts that would be solved with that would pertain to many different nations on the territory of one country. We do not have cosmopolitan cities, which is everyday life, media life, social life. We don't have this multiculturalism. We are monocultural, boring society with maybe a couple of exotic niches, but that is not the cultural exotics, it's not the ethnical exotics. We don't have these threats from the point of view of some minorities or extremists, so we're being provincial and we're very much backward. And we're so many here at this table, it's so little time to talk, but I'm waiting, I'm looking forward to Warsaw becoming a cosmopolitan city in the future. I would love the Polish society to become a cosmopolitan society, a global one. Then we will feel what it is to belong to this global community, and then our mass media will become much more global media, world-scale media. Right now, we are living in this modest province, and we have this neutral state of mass media, and so I think that cosmopolitan character is not us, but being monocultural, it doesn't mean that, it is not to say that we're not interested in the others. Well, I think that perhaps I'm going to be brutal in making a certain distinction. On the one hand, we have the elites, and then we have non-elites, to say the least. That is, the elites and those who are quite different from the elites, to be polite. And so sometimes we see horrible behavior in public spaces or on the stadiums. There are unacceptable manifestations and behaviors on the stadiums, for instance. Although, let me add one point to that. My own child, long time ago, a little child then, maybe he was 3 years old, for the first time in his life he saw a black person. What did he do? He showed his finger at him and started shouting. I was embarrassed, but what do you do about the child? Kill my own child? Spit on him or what? So he was not hostile, he was not being hostile towards that black person, but it was just confronting otherness, and that was quite painful for the black person in question, but there was no bad intention in my child, definitely. So when I'm talking about horrible behavior, this horrible behavior is because of meeting the otherness. And yes, indeed so. When Professor Hartman said that we are being a homogeneous society, we're a relatively homogeneous society due to our history, due to the fact that in the Polish People's Republic we were covered by a concrete shelter, and we're a poor country, so we're not attractive so far. But I think the opinions of elites are quite different from those opinions of the non-elite. And what has already been said here in this room, I see this longing for multiculturalism. I even understand that. But let me address your attention to the fact that if it is longing because of our fascination, and perhaps we have some complexes of not having it, then this is absurd longing for multiculturalism. There is no sensible analysis what would be happening here with regard when multiculturalism comes here. And how about European Union? We are in the same house, we're in the same home, so to speak, in the European Union. It's our own home as well, and we are probably prone to multiculturalism as well. Although 10 or 15 years ago, a Prime Minister of France, Michel Rocard, said that Europe and France are not capable of hosting the whole poverty of the world, but we have Lampedusa, and we have other places, not only in Spain. Also, when in Spain, for instance, tens of thousands of people from Africa, but not only, are risking their lives and their health, and they are going through barbed wire. They take kayaks to cross the sea. Sometimes they die just to get through to Europe. Why? Because Europe is the myth of a better life. Sometimes actually it's a real better life. So Europe albeit doesn't want to be a fortress, besieged fortress or a fortress, and Europe has these huge complexes about our own colonial past. Actually, we don't have it in Poland. And that is something that could be an asset of Poland. So in Europe we must have some sort of common vision of future for those people who come here from abroad. When I listened to Professor Środa, she introduced this notion of integration and assimilation. Maybe, perchance, I was mistaken, I was wrong, but I had that impression that integration is okay and assimilation is bad. Well, for many years, indeed, this type of thinking was dominating in Europe, especially in the United Kingdom, but also in the 1960s and 1970s the French resigned from their enlightened conviction that the French culture, or maybe European culture, is above all. And we all started thinking that no, we cannot ascribe a value to culture. Evaluating culture is wrong, because each culture is worth what it is worth. They're all similar. So, in fact, the only proper, noble, and morally acceptable way would be to provide for integration, but not assimilation. The effects are such that, and actually, you probably see that Cameron, Merkel, Sarkozy, I mean, people of all sorts of political walks of life, all of them say, Holland, by the way, as well, not himself though, but he uses the mouth of his Minister of Foreign Affairs. He says, it's enough. We must abandon the idea of multiculturalism because that failed. Well, let me tell you this story. There is a Moroccan writer who writes in French, Tahar Berrier, or Bergel, however you read it, he pronounced his name. And many years ago, I read one of his novels, actually a great writer, and there I found a sentence which I remember all too well. He is describing a Moroccan woman. She does something, whatever she does, and she has kids and she's doing the washing, right? She's doing the washing. And the sentence is as this: Fatma was doing the washing for of her children, and husband not interested in stains, because the stains that have been washed become clean. And that was it. That was a complete revelation. It shows so well what multiculturalism is. It depends on the type of logic that we take. Okay, if there is a stain, if you wash it, it's a clean stain, it's fine, it's okay. So, the stains, according to us, even a clean stain is still unacceptable. It's still a stain. So when she does the washing in this way, and she thinks that it's all okay because this is a clean stain, but once she does it this way, here in Warsaw, in Krakow, in Paris, or in London, her kids are perceived to be dirty because they have stained clothes. All those stains are clean. So they are perceived as being different, inferior, dirty children. So, as you can see, in the same time, in the same territory, one of those two logic has got to win. It cannot be that there will be both logics. There will be only one. And maybe due to a long period of education, there will be one. But now it is unthinkable of. On a micro scale, we in Poland, we have this problem with the Roma community. Actually, we're going to talk about the future as well. Oh, sorry, I know. If I may interrupt, and we'll get back to it soon enough. But if I may just, I would like to finish my thought. Just 3 sentences. So, I don't know how about the UK, but in France, until recently, that is until 2004, were the Cour de Compte, when the National Audit Office noticed that they have no statistics on migrants because they're banned. I mean, they cannot collect data on the religion, religious affiliation. They cannot collect data on the appearance of the people. They simply can't. No statistics is collected. So the National Audit Office in France says that the only certain number that they could quote is 800 million euros spent in 2004 for medical care services given to asylum seekers. But immigrants are not only asylum seekers. By the way, asylum seekers is just a micro scale, it's a micro group. So they, in France, they've got so far with this conviction that whatever Kairaki is bad, that they detach themselves from reality, and now it's working against them. Thank you. Let's get back to the Polish media. Łukasz Warzecha, how about you? Well, I liked what Liliana said when she quoted the fragment of those clean stains and dirty stains, and I started thinking, what would I do if my daughter, now 6, would see a child in those clothes? Would she say that the child is dirty, wearing dirty clothes? According to the logic of political correctness, I would respond, no, the child is clean, not dirty. But if my daughter were to have the same stain, I would say that this stain is dirty in case of my daughter and is clean in case of the other kid. I wouldn't do that. I would say they believe that that is clean, although it isn't clean. Objectively, from our point of view, it is not clean, but they believe that it is clean. So that would be my standpoint. And that is the illustration of what might happen due to the imposition of political correctness in our languages. Just the aberration of logic. There is just one logic. If there is a stain is dirty, full stop. Stain, dirt, full stop. You can't do anything about it. But I like stories, so let me tell you another one. Just to show you the problem, and that shows a problem very well. So I used to work for with a Berber, an Algerian guy, a Berber. He kept on saying that he's not from Algeria, he was a Berber from Algeria. Of course, he was Muslim, and he was very well oriented in the Polish culture. And of course, due to his appearance, you could immediately tell that he was a Berber. But if you were just to talk to him without seeing the guy, if you just don't think about his accent, but his knowledge would immediately speak for the fact that he's like a Pole. So remember, late evening, we switched on TV, we were sitting in the office, and we saw a movie, a scene from a very famous movie, just for 10 seconds, and I asked him, do you know the movie? And he said, of course, it's Wesela, he said. And he did not get the right for permanent residence in Poland, so he had to leave for Canada. And then I live in a community in Leszna Wola, not far from Warsaw. There is a custody center for migrants, for asylum seekers. And not far from there, there is a huge trade center that is populated by Vietnamese, and they live there. They have their own houses. They probably bought those houses or just built those houses, and those are good, solid, big, nice, presentable houses. They drive cars with Warsaw registration plates. They send their kids to schools and kindergartens, and I do not see in my environment not any single problem about those Vietnamese kids. They speak Polish, they meet Polish kids, there are no problems. At the same time, some time ago, and there was a discussion forum in my town, and people started writing about those migrants from the custody center for asylum seekers, and then the story is very different. But what was the problem is, those Vietnamese guys, they assimilated, I'm using this word on purpose, they assimilated themselves with Poles. This is according to Professor Środa's notions. But I don't know what they do at homes. Maybe at homes they live just like in Vietnam, but outside they do not violate any Polish norms. But the asylum seekers from the custody center, as they were leaving the custody center, they could, for many hours, occupy a public football pitch that we have in our town. And usually people come there just to play football or volleyball, but the asylum seekers were monopolizing that area for hours, and they were behaving in a way that would be characteristic to their own culture, but is unacceptable to us. For instance, they were very much vociferous, and they were calling names our girls. And maybe someone should tell them that that's not the way to behave with regard to young ladies in Poland. But what should I do in this situation? Okay, I may say, all right, this is how they behave because this is their culture, this is tradition, and we can't do anything about it. Maybe we should cooperate with them. Maybe we should not offend their feelings. But I'm saying no, they are here. And as long as they are not violating our norms, just like the Vietnamese who live in the same place, then there is no problem. But for heaven's sake, if they do violate the norms, it's not us who have the problem. They are in trouble, they have a problem, and someone's got to explain that to them. And what if they don't want to abide? Then we'll have to assume that they will have to understand that they are our guests here. So being a guest, being a no guest, I don't know, maybe something that we can talk about. Maybe they're guests, maybe they're co-hosts. Cezary Gmyz, I don't know if you would agree, just in brief. I wanted to get back to the discussion, if I may, because we departed away from it a bit. But talking about multiculturalism, the problem is that our public is not really interested in it, but the mass media interested in it? Well, in Poland we have two centers where we do not have monoculturalism, which is the Opole region where we have a lot of Germans. But I was also thinking about Belarusians in Podlasie, and I was thinking about Lutherans in Silesia, in the Chechen Silesia, where I come from actually. So, as I was studying the results in different electoral offices, I saw that religious beliefs are very important, and they influence the political decisions taken by voters as they cast their ballot. So many times the religious belief would specify the political party they vote for. And in the newspaper, no one was interested in it, because the first question was, okay, who of those religious minorities buying our newspaper? Which newspaper was that? I won't tell you. But the editor-in-chief's first question was, who of them is buying our newspaper? None, so we're not interested in them. So I'm a Lutheran. And I wrote 2 big articles about Lutheran Church in Poland. But the first text was about the discussion of the ordination of women, and the second text was about the attitude of Lutherans to homosexualism. And also I wrote a third article about one of the Lutheran Church leaders who committed some bad things. Unfortunately, there is this demon of excuse me, the gentleman speaking too far from the mic. I have problems with the sound. The sound quality is too poor. Could you just indicate to the mic, get it closer? Thank you. So, one of the young editors once wrote a brief on that a person was convicted by, was accused by the court for zoophilia, that is, for having sex with a horse. And the internet scripts were done in such a way that, depending on the hits, this text was being moved up the scale. And the higher it was getting, the more clicks were there. In 3 days, we were there to change the script that was doing that that job because we bought the script from an outside company, so that the horse sex was not the news #1 in our newspaper, because in fact for many days the horse sex was the subject matter #1. Again, we're talking about the nature of the mass media, but maybe it is so that multicultural policy in Europe, we spoke about its fiasco, we were thinking whether it failed, but maybe the mass media be to be blamed for it as well. Maybe us, the journalists, we simply do not know how to describe this reality. Maybe it is us, the journalists, who lead to this tabloidization of this reality. And if someone is beaten, if something is bad, we keep writing about it. But maybe we're being stifled by political correctness. But maybe the mass media is also to be blamed for the fiasco of multicultural policy. Well, indeed, when Europe opened up to migrants, then the expectation was that we would receive cheap labor force. But it's not cheap labor force who came, but people. When people came and not labor force, then the problem was, okay, what do we do about humans? It's not just the people to serve coffee and teas in bars and to clean sweep the streets. They live in houses. And there were two strategies. One, liberal strategy. I know I'm being simplistic, but there were two options, liberal and conservative. The liberalism were glad to see that. They were saying that, okay, that is the multicultural cosmopolitan society. It's all diverse. Diversity is always better than monolith and so on. And the conservative milieu that said the process ghettoization was going on. People were being pushed back into their housing estates, they live together there, and okay, you may live here, but just don't make any problems, don't be troublemakers. So as far as the fiasco of multiculti is concerned, that both ways failed. That is to say, one cannot always be open and receive more and more people, and we also cannot allow for the ghettoization and say, we cannot tell these people, okay, this is where you can live, practice your rituals, cults, prayers, and so on and so forth. I think that strong liberal democracy and also the strong mass media should not yield to these two extremely different approaches. We should be diligent in the presentation of the problems. So we, as the devil is afraid of holy water, this is how we, the mass media, should be afraid of following just one of the two options. And as far as Poland is concerned, in Poland we speak of multiculti like we have no problem with multiculti, but sometimes in Poland we show Western examples as a sign of warning and say, okay, if we open the borders, then we'll end up with the same problems as they have in the UK, in France and Germany. So we say, okay, in Poland we may be a little bit open to Belarus and Ukraine. They're Christians, they're fine. It's like the same Eastern European soul, a bit frenzy, a bit crazy, but God forbid, no Pakistanis in Poland or no Filipinos in Poland. That would be the end of the world, and that would be the end of the Polish white heterosexual Catholic. We cannot allow that to happen. So that is another statement. So finally, I would like to say that the problem with the understanding of the otherness is that we ourselves, we have never understood what it means to be the other. To understand the others, you've got to be a minority yourself, and then you understand. And so I'm so happy that Poles leave for other countries in the EU, and they meet other multicultural societies, and then they become minorities there. So all of a sudden it happens that their own Catholic Church is being surrounded by synagogues, mosques, and Buddhist shrines. And it's good to have Ryanair, although this is no advert of Ryanair. There were so many questions that I completely lost. So let me just pick up a subject myself. No. If you could please talk about the Polish media. Polish media and multiculturalism. Okay. It's not that bad. Łukasz Warzecha is afraid that they will forbid him writing about gypsies. I don't think so. His employer knows that there will be internet fora, and there is the internet, and there is this permissibility to call spade a spade. And in the internet, this is this charm of Mr. Warzecha. He always calls spade a spade. So Mr. Warzecha will be allowed to write the way he writes. So I think that Mr. Warzecha, you don't have to be concerned about the permission. You will always be granted the permission to write the way you write. Also, Professor spoke about differences to the types of communications that are allowed depending on the milieu that we move in. Maybe this is an important differentiation. Well, Facebook, is it my private space or public space? Is it closed profile, but is it still private profile, or is it open profile? May I quote Madam Professor or not really? So this implies that this mass media, is it really multicultural, or maybe it isn't? I think not, because from what I see, from what other speakers say, I think there is a problem with multiculturalism with the Polish media. We just can't make it. I mean, the Polish readers are not interested in Protestants that we have had in Poland forever, and they are a part of multiculturalism. For some reason, no one wants to read about Protestants, and there are no Jews in Poland. Pakistanis who are due to come to Poland to save our democracy, demography, they have not yet arrived to Poland, so nothing to write about Pakistanis in Poland yet. So we have created these problems ourselves, you see, and if we do not have those others, then we'll have to create the others from other poles. So we have to build internal walls, and then we stop communicating with those others, so that to have those others here, but we make them out of ourselves. Talking about tabloidization, you remember about articles in the Polish newspapers after the terror attacks were made. Breivik, for instance, became hero in a sense, and there was no debate those days about the context. There were no articles about the root causes, and there were no articles describing the root causes for his actions. Well, actually, I wrote a text about it, and I wrote that regardless of how critical we are towards his deed, we have to understand the reasons that something went wrong. And then I was thrashed by the left that how on earth could I write like that? Am I trying to justify Breivik? I wasn't trying to justify him. Or someone was like Makowski was saying, church, mosque, synagogue, it's so nice, it's so fun, let's go west. I don't know, do you like that in the UK, not to offend Muslims, Christians cannot wear crosses in public spaces if they perform public functions? Is that okay? Is this what you want to advertise? Is that fine by you? That's the real problem, and that's the problem I'm telling you about. Something is wrong here. It's us here, we're here, it's our home, we are in Europe, and Europe has got a foundation. By the way, religious foundations, not them, they are our guests. We can treat our guests, and we should treat our guests with all due respect, but they all should respect us as well. And not to offend their feelings, if we take our crosses and religious symbols off our garment, this is not normal. This is an aberration. So, Mr. Makowski, could you kindly explain that? What is your feeling about that? And one more notion, perhaps I would address it to our foreign guests. I think no one has said that the Republic of Poland has a beautiful multicultural tradition tradition, the first Republic of Poland in the Middle Ages, and Poles, Ruthenians, and the second Republic of Poland. I'm thinking about the first Republic of Poland, Lithuanians, Ruthenians, Tatars, Muslim by the way, and all of them lived in one country for many, many, many years, and that was life in Concord. And many times they worked for one Republic of Poland, one state, and there was no big problem about that. So perhaps one should refer to that tradition, and that was the strength of the Republic of Poland.
Well, the question is whether we know how to use it, Jarosław Makowski. It's not only that question you're asking about braving. We must look at our level, the typical case of tabloidization, and we're now talking about a different culture of poverty. That was the little Madzia's mother. I couldn't really look at the media because there's always been her, but I never read a text about a child who died in Będzin. So something that wouldn't be objective. No media got interested in that. Now, because of this My Trottel TNT thing, and then Putin was telling Tusk, okay, TNT, fucking T, but what about the mother of little Madzia? Come on. Okay, this was also a part of this multiculturalism in the reaction. Answering, I like a society that keeps to the rules of liberal democracy. It doesn't matter whether you're a Jew, Catholic, liberal, or anyone else. The framework within which we operate is a framework formed by liberal democracy. This democracy defines what can be done and what can't. It is so, of course, and it is still so that those who had those radical preferences, and they are ready to challenge or ridicule the civil freedoms. That's why I want rather see liberal democracy to be stronger in defense of its principles, especially because there are people who are ready to challenge its impact. Because it is so that there is no other political system apart from liberal democracy that would guarantee the freedom of conscience, the freedom of religion to all the religions, beginning with Catholics and ending with Muslims. Naturally, that's the truth, but it's only a part of truth, as what would liberal democracy do faced with a situation when large social groups claim treating their traditions, their culture, as the history and culture that they found there on the spot? I didn't really follow upon it, so I don't know how it ended, but there were a few questions were French citizens, and it was the same thing happened in Spain, would come with multiple wives because they came from deep down there in Africa. In only some countries you can have more wives. In the president of the Republic of South Africa, I believe, recently married the fourth of the fifth wife. Now the question is, how do the media react to all this? The media must, or at least should, react. Sorry, I cannot hear a person who's not using a microphone. That's not an artificial program. Sorry, I cannot hear a speaker who's not using a microphone. No. No, I cannot agree to it that it is not a realistic problem, because it is a problem for very many people and also for the courts. Obviously, as part of the current situation, such a union is impossible, but benefits are for a number of wives and a number of children. We remember this story. It's not something that would be just an individual isolated case. Sorry, I cannot hear the speaker who's not using a microphone. Sorry, we are now facing a question. A question, but why? You say that this goes against law. What do you think this law is based on? What do we follow? In France, there will be an appropriately large number of Muslims, and the law will change because there will be a powerful group. We have liberal democracy, and liberal democracy means also the rule of majority. So majority rule, if there are enough Muslim people in the election, then they change the law. The question is, why not? Why not have a number of wives? Liberal democracy is not the rule of majority, it's the rule of that saves minorities. Sorry, I don't understand then. So who makes the decision? There is a board, and the legal people will tell you. It's easy. If you knew this tradition, you would know that you cannot in liberal countries break the human rights. Who decides what human rights are? We know what that is because we have certain clauses. We don't change it. How do you know it? You can bring everything to the absurdity, but I will ask you one question. You said you are a happy person. No, I never said that. You said that you are still satisfied that you're not going to prison when you say to gypsy somebody up, when you use the language without respecting the standards of this horrid political correctness. But when you spoke of the immigrants from Lesznowola, you required that they adjust their language. Yes, because we are at home. And what about us, Poles in London? I believe that they should respect the standards binding in London. For example, also the religious norms. Okay, what are the religious norms there? Because as far as I know, the UK are a part of our culture. But if this principle of assimilation that you are referring to worked throughout Europe, the Londoners or English people could say there is no Catholicism. Well, they have the politics of integration. You can respect your own religion. You would like everyone to be nice like the Vietnamese. Polish language, good language. We can call a gypsy, a Jew, a Jew, but when you say drunk as a Pole, then there would be frustration. I don't think so. If a Pole is drunk, that's an objective fact. Well, the stereotypes are enshrined and ensconced in some facts. So do the negative stereotypes on Poles. There is a certain number of phenomena. We remember how one of German magazines wrote something funny about the president, Lech Kaczyński. The fury was absolute and unbelievable. What is it to prove? We must be watchful when we use terms based on stereotypes. They may denote and at the same time play a function that harms, that hurts, that wrongs. If somebody doesn't like the word street cleaner, why don't we call them an ecological operator? Let me tell you one thing. When I'm listening to certain speeches It seems to me that I'm really a Christian. I'm really a person who would like people not to harm one another, so that they could say, okay, that will be recorded, and unbelievable. I like Christianity very much, by the way. I understand it rather like the teaching of Jesus Christ, not the listening to our tycoons of the church. I see that there are those people who represent the tribal mentality. Ours is good, others off with you. This is this old tribal mentality that Christianity broke through and continues to break through. It's not only that you need some knowledge. You spoke of multiple wives, but you spoke of Christianity, which is a part of our identity. And you're speaking about some universalism that is supposed to go beyond that Christianity. This is a very specific team of interdependencies. I didn't want to butt in earlier because we had a very interesting example really on multiculturality and treatment of these questions and the approach to the difference. At the same time, this is a true media panel. Nothing here is based on any predefined scenario. We have some time for questions from the floor. To you, do we have some time for that? I just wanted to say one thing because, again, I hear from the two gentlemen here that the critique that sometimes is related to your controversial statements is a form of censorship, that there is some general political correctness. I believe that using phrases like to gypsy out, a Jew down, is only a testimony to culture. And yes, such phrases can be used. There's a different philosophy. Some Poles believe it's better to speak of their faults, that this builds a certain self-reflection better, and that's very important for each nation, and others would be looking for forms which will be very good for them in various terms are used for their neighbors. And I also believe that this may work very well on your recipients. Some may believe those claims, and why not? We luckily live in a country where you can practice your style of journalism. Well, I impose certain language standards on myself. It's not so that I use all the terms that you mentioned, and the last thing I'd like there to be is that they are forbidden. Sometimes we hurt our minorities. Once I talked to an activist of the Roma minority, to be politically correct, and he said, "Stop calling me Roma, I'm used to being called a gypsy." Honestly speaking, I am a representative of a religious minority, and I would be really revolted if somebody stopped calling me heretic. I call myself a heretic, although it is a very strongly emotional word. Another question?
Thank you. London. Very, very interesting discussion, much of which I recognise from my own country. I would say that you should not suffer from a monocultural inferiority complex. You seem to have lots of very interesting people in Poland, Lutherans and Germans and Vietnamese. You're also, the Poles in Britain are also very much in the multiculturalist front line. They often live in some of the poorer parts of our big cities alongside Muslim Britons. And there is sometimes a bit of friction because a lot of the Poles do like to drink in public, and the Muslims don't like that very much. But lots of other British people do quite like that. I mean, the truth is that in Britain we are really what is sometimes called a plural monoculturalist society, and this is now increasingly evident in the media as well. Although I think we did have quite a good record going back now 2 or 3 decades in promoting the visibility of minority Britons in the media as newsreaders and reporters, and that was a very good thing. I think it really helped minority Britons sort of see themselves reflected in the public square, which was a very good thing. But certainly in the last 20 years or so, particularly with the development of cable television, a lot of ethnic minority Britons now live, their media life is now very much a minority media world, often international, global channels or channels from their country of origin, or we have a specialist Islam channel, for example, that's watched by a lot of Muslims. Even the BBC has a BBC Asian network, although that itself is quite interesting because it started off as a program that was based on the premise that the Asian voices were not heard sufficiently in mainstream channels, but it's now become a sort of talent pool for Asian comedians and all sorts of things like that. I mean, we've obviously had a lot of the free speech that you've been talking about. We have going back to the Salman Rushdie affair, and we did. I mean, a lot of people think, and possibly either of my colleagues might believe that in order to maintain good relations between majority and minority, or indeed between minorities in a society which is more multi-racial than Poland is, that requires restraints on free speech. A lot of people do believe that. So far, it has not really happened, although it came quite close. We passed a religious hatred law a year or so ago but it was very much watered down by Parliament to prevent too many restrictions on freedom of speech. Anyway, I mean, I think just the final thought is that, I mean, I think we certainly in Britain are in danger of moving into an increasingly sort of digitally segregated world. I mean, particularly on the internet, but also in the electronic media more generally. I mean, this is true of the majority population as well as minority Britons, but I think it's particularly true of minority Britons. Really, increasingly live in a separate media and digital world, which, you know, if you do become a more multi-ethnic, multiracial country, I think you should try and avoid.
Jeszcze jakieś pytania? Jeszcze jedno pytanie. Proszę? To może rzeczywiście, tak? Jaka jest decyzja państwa? Tłumaczymy?
Nie, ale rozumiemy, że jest... Ale nie wszyscy mieli...
What's going on is that the Polish speakers didn't take the headsets, and they didn't receive any interpretation. So Piotrek will now will interpret what you've said in a consecutive mode, which will take some time. So Piotrek is merely interpreting your contribution right now.
Które można uznać za czary pewnej gettoizacji, gdzie mieszkają także i wyznawcy islamu. Kwestia na przykład poważnych problemów między tymi dwoma grupami pojawia się wtedy, kiedy mówimy o porządku publicznym. Polacy będą zachowywać się hałaśliwie i pić w przeciwieństwie do drugiej społeczności. Z drugiej strony jednak w Wielkiej Brytanii ludzie raczej żyją w lepszych relacjach, w lepszych stosunkach, ponieważ też może dlatego, że jesteśmy bardziej wielorasowym społeczeństwem, gdzie w związku z tym łatwiej jest też przestrzegać zasad wolności mowy. Do tej pory nie mieliśmy z wieloma z tych rzeczy, które się dzieją, do czynienia i na przykład także nie było czegoś takiego jak mowa nienawiści. W chwili, w której staraliśmy się wpisać to, skodyfikować pewne prawa związane z mową nienawiści, nasz parlament raczej tą kartą grać nie chciał. I taka kolejna jeszcze myśl a propos tego, co tutaj poruszaliśmy też kwestię prasy, to, że w Wielkiej Brytanii w tym momencie jest takie silne przejście do świata cyfrowego, do świata, który każdy może sobie tworzyć. Ja wcześniej mówiłem, że w Wielkiej Brytanii mamy różnego rodzaju media, mamy kanał dla mieszkających tutaj Chińczyków, mamy tutaj też kanały dla Arabów i innych wspólnot, a zatem zgodnie z tym te media elektroniczne są jeszcze bardziej wyłączające w tym sensie, że są dla pewnych enklaw. Są media, które są wykorzystywane przez większość, ale są takie, z których korzystają pewne konkretne mniejszości. I przez to mamy tutaj zupełnie inne światy, w których te mniejszości żyją. To są światy mediów cyfrowych.
Jeszcze jedno pytanie.
One more question. I just wanted to say the following. My personal impression is that I believe that the mass media are guilty of tabloidisation and multiculturalism. Why? Let me give this example. In May, there was this situation that on the streets of London, a British soldier died, killed by a machete, killed by a Muslim, from what I remember. And of course, that was a shocking piece of news, and it was omnipresent in all mass media in Europe. And post factum, the recording was all over the world because it was recorded not just the case of murder, but just after, and it was recorded by a passerby on a mobile phone by two actually persons, and then in the internet, in the mass media, there were the pictures taken by that mobile phone, and the reports of witnesses and passers-by who happened to be there at that time, and photographs of that man who killed the soldier with a machete, and the soldier was died, so was covered by a piece of cloth. So I actually found out much more, not about the victim, but about the perpetrator, because the mass media were writing about his motivation and his CV and why he wanted to kill that soldier, and loads of pictures, and the internet and the mass media were flooded with that type of information. So I think this is what mass media are after. The tabloids, they use such situations promptly because you're all about viewership and you're all interested in selling your newspapers, and that was the sensation that tabloids were after. For me, it was something brutal and something, this tabloids turn murderers into heroes, and this is incitement to hatred. I actually started hating the guy, genuinely hating the guy, once I found out about his reasons for killing a British soldier, and in London during the day. Could happen anywhere, but tabloids actually made that person into a quasi-hero because he is interesting. That the other guy's dead, let's forget about him, and that's horrible because this is something that is incites to hatred in European societies, and this turns criminals into some sort of press heroes or internet heroes, because the internet was flourishing with those pictures. Those pictures we immediately purchased probably for big cash from those passers-by, and those passers-by understood they made good money on that because they sold the pictures to tabloids, and the tabloids would immediately use them for sensation. Something incredible, and mean, we should think about multiculturalism or the consequences of multiculturalism, and one of the consequences in this situation was violence, crime, and hatred. And all of that was boiled down to a sensation. Just like Magda's mother was a sensation, in this case this was this guy, and this sensation was there in the media sphere, and this is bad job done by the mass media against multiculturalism. Perhaps you could respond to that. Who of you would like to defend the mass media?
Jakoś postaram się krótko, więc nie bardzo rozumiem pani zarzut.
I don't understand your charges. Do you expect the mass media not to inform about such events? I don't see a point. What is it that you're expecting? Each mass media has got a poetry of its own. Some people show pictures and some write important analytical piece of work. You can't expect a tabloid to write an analytical article. The problem is when a press that is supposed to present an analytical article doesn't do so. That would be the problem. I also don't understand your accusation that the story shown in such a way incites to hatred. I disagree. I mean, the hatred had already been there. It's the murderer of that soldier. And so this is where there is a source. Maybe it's about religion, maybe it's about their standpoint, maybe it's about their approach to the country. I don't know. The mass media simply reported on the fact, that's all. And here we could see that, and here's the machete, because actually on the basis of British mass media, some statements of that murderer were cut out, and those were the sentences that could have been most hurting, because that person was religiously inspired, and those as a Muslim, he was religiously inspired, and they should have shown all of it and not cut out the statements that were connected to religion. I just want to say that we won't change it, just in brief, really in brief, because we know this phenomenon since ancient days. I mean, can you name at least one of the victims by name, or the victims of Holocaust? But we all know about Hitler, Himmler, and those arch criminals. They stay in the public mind and not the names of the victims. It's because of the mass media? No. The mass media reflect their readers. Can you handle without the mic? The interpreter's point of view is no interpretation without the mic. Well, of course, the gentleman may get by, but we won't. Thank you. Just to sum up briefly, talking about Max Kolonko and his shallow description of the modern world. It's just what Mr. Gmyz said. He said that multiculturalism that we have had in Poland for centuries, in fact, our mass media are not interested in it. For instance, if you go to Podlasie, you will meet the Tatars, and if you ask our Tatars, do they feel to be Polish, they will say, we are not Poles, we are Poles. And we don't feel to be Poles, we are Poles. And that's interesting. And we don't have that in the mass media. So we all sort of agreed that we're being monocultural society, and multiculturalism is not here, and we don't have it as much as our neighbors have. But Jarosław Makowski spoke about the Poles. He spoke about the Poles. It takes to become an other. It takes to become a minority in order to feel what they feel. This is what Łukasz Warzecha, also from Leszno Wolot, was speaking about those people. And I should say that if this is how we talk about multiculturalism, then, and this multiculturalism is yet coming to Poland. Once we start writing about Vietnamese who live in Poland, if we are to divide this society into us and them, then we won't come up with any sensible conclusions. If this is the way you divide the Polish society, or people who live in Poland, who stay on the territory of Poland, this is our culture, Polish culture, and this is them and their culture, then you should not attend a multicultural discussion whatsoever. I've never read anything interesting in the newspaper that you work for. So how should I divide them? Like, should I pretend they're ours people? Well, you say them, they. You divide the society. But listen, they are Vietnamese who live in Poland. So are they? Who like UFO people? No. Vietnamese, it's people with whom you have the dialogue, but they are Vietnamese. Listen to me. It's about multiculturalists. They are Vietnamese who came from another culture. But it's not a sin to be Vietnamese. But did I say that it was a sin to be Vietnamese? No, I didn't say that. It's your conclusion. No. I'd really love to read your publications on multiculturalism, except for your articles. You haven't said anything, and you haven't thought anything interesting about multiculturalism. Oh, you really intrigues me now. Now, you want to talk about multiculturalism, that is many cultures, right? Now, if you want to close your eyes to the fact that some guys come from one culture and other guys come from another culture, and it's a problem to you, so how are you going to talk about it? Because what, like people A, people B, what? Listen, I'm talking about dialogue, and you are talking about showing your finger by the punishing finger to those who misbehave. I think what would be more interesting to run a dialogue and just to have a regular verbal dialogue with them, or not coming to the football pitch saying this is Lishno Volna Poland and this is the football pitch. It was not the Vietnamese, it was the Pakistani on that football pitch. Whatever. I think dialogue is more important than punishing people. I have never said anything like that we have to chase them away or throw them out. I didn't say that. I said that someone should explain them that some behaviors are unacceptable here. Now I see what you meant. Thank you.
Można? Też w sumie pytanie wychodzi z tej dyskusji.
Now, you spoke about guests. At what time these guests, like the Vietnamese for instance, who speak Polish perfect, who were born here, at what time do they become us? Just a story to that. At what time shall we defend their rights? I mean their rights, using the rules of discrimination. And the story from a university life. Once I witnessed a situation when a student who speaks perfect Polish, and she is a Vietnamese girl. I mean, she's of Vietnamese origin, definitely. So she comes and talks to a person who represents the university of I won't tell you what. Oh, there are many universities, right? So she is there, and there is this dialogue between the staff of the university, and one says about that person, and the other says, what do you mean? That person? Showing like this with the fingers, look at me. So, tell me, at what time shall we start protecting those people? I mean, are they others or are they us? I mean, do we have the right to... Does it mean... Is it to say that they've got the right to be not discriminated, or do we have the right to be politically incorrect, non-discriminated? Everyone should be non-discriminated. In this situation, I thought that there will be that someone would say that a jab or whatever, something offensive. It was just a joke, maybe not a good one, but it would be difficult to say by means of regulation to establish the date since when we're going to protect them. We're not talking about legal protection systems, we're talking about imponderabilia. Let me reiterate, when I was working with that Berber from Algeria, I had that feeling that he is a Berber, but he was so very much soaked with Poland, saturated with Polishness, and he knew so much about us and who we are, then I would be overjoyed to welcome him. I would overjoyed to see him receiving Polish citizenship. He is a Polish guy because he felt, he understood, he knew, being a Berber at the same time.
Okay.
2 points, if I may add to what was mentioned by Professor. Indeed, the Polish mass media are not the best in that sense that they do not help this society, which is quite homogeneous, to tell the difference between us and the others. This animosity, jokes, ridiculing, it's all because of ignorance. If I don't know, it means that I don't accept. Not knowing means not accepting. It's someone strange, and I don't want to have anything in common with that stranger. So the mass media do not help us to understand that we are, or we may be, a heterogeneous society, and also a good society or decent society is the one which treats minorities and not protects majority. The majority will get by always. So you can tell the difference between a decent and indecent society by the way they treat minorities. And this is something that marks the society. Are we open? Are we tolerant society? Or perhaps we're closed? Or perhaps we're hostile towards the others? Just one notion, if I may. Mike. Please remember about the mics. Well, we Poles, we keep saying that we Poles being so intolerant, that we're so bad. Well, let me tell you another story from a university about students. Carolina, Marcin, we saw that a group of Mexicans came to us. It was Euroculture program, and so a group of Mexican ladies came in September, fascinated with Poland, great, wonderful city, Kraków. They came to Kraków to study. In November, complete depression. It's so dirty, it's so cold, it's so dark, no sun. Here, autumn is horrible in Poland, and all the pavements are ugly, public transport too expensive. Generally speaking, it is dramatically bad. And it was the first time when I ever said, did you come here? And they said, we have it better. We want to go back to Mexico, although everything was paid for. That they won't be able to survive autumn in Poland because it's too bad for them. They're not used to it. And then I said them, did you come here to have Mexico here, or did you come here to have Poland here? So you, as students of Euroculture, did you come here to see the difference, or did you come here to see the same? Because it is a different country, is it not? So you should have thought of it better prior to coming here. And it doesn't matter whether you go to Italy or the Czech Republic, you've got to think, what is it that you're going to? And are you open or are you closed? So it's not just about us, and it's just, it's that we have this glitch, that we Poles have this, we at the core Poles are closed people to others. No, we aren't. We like, of course we like something that is familiar and not unfamiliar. and when others come here and they force us to behave in a different way. But the question is, what is that boundary? When is it that we have to say, let us open up, and sometimes we withdraw? So what is that boundary? When we discriminate someone or when we remain open? I think it's a universal problem. I think that gradually we'll have to wind up the official part unless one of the panelists has this urgent to say, yes, I want. I think this type of declaration that we respect every human being and everyone has got the right to his or her own culture and everyone has got right to have some viewpoints. As Professor Środa said, that when she spoke about when in Judaism the man was the icon of God, or Christianity that is equal for all, and we thought it's so elementary that no need to talk about. That's the axioma of our culture. We are Christians, or we are Jews, or perhaps we're from the enlightened tradition, or atheists. It's so elementary that one should even think about it. At the university it seemed to be obvious, and that's obvious for me. I thought that we were talking about something else. If tabloidisation is there, and it is there, and it's not only about some crazy man being, some murderer being showed in 1,100 ways. It's just the primitivization of the discussion, and even if it does not pertain to us directly, it is still has got something with us to do in the future. Multiculturalism, it's not just of having 15 bars, Mexican restaurants, Pakistani, Indian, Moroccan restaurants. Okay, fine, happy, super, great. But it's not just that, because that would have the whole tale of things. Just let me tell you this another story that I just thought of when Professor Godzic spoke about, when it's about Asia, when he spoke about Asia. So there was Matteo Ricci, an Italian monk. He went to China as one of the first monks to go there. He was a very important person. He was accepted by the Caesar, and he said to carve in stone beautiful statement, respect to heaven. And the Christian monk from Italy was thrilled, because the word respect in the Chinese language means something different, and heaven in Chinese terms is something different, and the entire case was just a ritual. This was just a present to this Italian monk, and that in fact that present has had nothing in common with converting into Christianity, but the monk saw it that way. But talking about mass media and talking about the writers and journalists, Matteo Ricci wrote this volume of memoirs. Fascinating. If you find it, read it. And 20 years before, there was a Polish Dominican. I don't even know his name, because there are no memoirs of his. And this is how we finish with this story. Unless, as just to show multiculturalism in mass media, how mass media approaches multiculturalism. There was that movie. There was ridiculing minorities. It was Borat. Remember Borat? That was the movie that was ridiculing minorities, and it was all about associated with Eastern Europe. Moustache, it was all smelling with Eastern Europe, and I didn't see any film critic who would be serious about criticizing this movie for that. No one was courageous enough to criticize the Borat, and of course it didn't show multiculturalism in the way we want to see it, and it was not really funny. It was just ridiculing. Okay, we have to finish officially, but unofficial talks will run in the couloirs. Okay, I have to give the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, today's conference in fact opens up a 2-year cycle of events planned by our association, the Beethoven Association. Please use our website to follow our events, and we can use the couloirs of the university to follow with our conversations. And I would like to thank you for today. Thanks. Bye-bye.